Halloween has always been a highlight in our quiet neighborhood. Every year, children in colorful costumes would flood the streets, laughter and excitement in the air. It was a night for families to come together to celebrate the spooky and supernatural. Little did I know that one Halloween night would become a haunting memory etched in my mind forever. The evening had been perfect. The decorations were up, the candy bowl filled, and the porch light aglow. My wife and I loved seeing the children's faces light up when they received their treats. We cherished the sense of community that Halloween brought, and it was a tradition we eagerly anticipated. As the sun set, the first trick-or-treaters arrived, their costumes ranging from witches to superheroes. We greeted each one with a smile, and the children departed with bags full of candy and smiles on their faces. Then as the night grew darker, a chill settled in the air, and an unsettling silence fell upon our street. We exchanged uneasy glances, wondering where the usual excitement had gone. It was as if a heaviness had descended, casting a shadow over the festivities. As we stood on our porch, the porch light flickered ominously. I dismissed it as a minor electrical glitch and handed out candy to the few remaining trick-or-treaters. But something felt off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Just as I was about to head inside, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a child, or at least it appeared to be one. The costume was strange, a tattered, hooded cloak that obscured their face completely. All I could see were a pair of piercing, unnaturally bright eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. The child stood there, unmoving, as if waiting for something. My unease deepened, but I didn't want to be rude. I offered a piece of candy, but the figure made no move to take it. Instead, they extended a bony hand, palm up, as if expecting something more. I exchanged a puzzled glance with my wife, unsure of what to do. Finally, I placed a few extra pieces of candy in the child's hand. As they closed their fingers around the candy, I couldn't help but notice how cold their touch was, like ice. Without a word, the child turned and melted back into the darkness, disappearing into the night. My wife and I exchanged bewildered looks. That had been the oddest encounter we'd ever had on Halloween. Shrugging off the unsettling encounter, we went back inside and tried to enjoy the remainder of the evening. However, the sense of unease lingered, and I found myself glancing at the window, half expecting to see those piercing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. As the night wore on, I decided to investigate. I slipped out of the house and into the cool night air, the darkness pressing in around me. I followed the path that the strange trick-or-treater had taken, my heart pounding in my chest. I ventured deeper into the neighborhood, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. The streets were empty, and an eerie silence hung in the air. It was as if the world had become still, holding its breath. I soon found myself at the edge of the woods that bordered our neighborhood. The sensation of being watched intensified, and I shined my flashlight into the dense trees. There, among the gnarled branches and twisted roots, I saw them, the piercing eyes glowing in the darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure was no longer in its childlike form. It had transformed into something monstrous, a hulking, shadowy presence. It loomed in the trees, its eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Unable to tear my gaze away, I watched as the figure slowly extended a long skeletal arm toward me. It beckoned, its fingers curling in a silent gesture. Panic surged through me and I turned and ran, stumbling through the dark woods, my heart pounding in my ears. As I reached the safety of our neighborhood, I glanced back one last time. The figure had vanished, its eyes no longer piercing the night. I rushed back to our home, my wife waiting anxiously at the door. I tried to explain what I had seen, but the words came out as disjointed fragments. My wife held me, soothing my fears and assuring me it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been out there in the darkness, something that had come to our quiet neighborhood on Halloween night. Whether it was a restless spirit or something more malevolent, I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that the memory of those piercing eyes would haunt my dreams for years to come, a chilling reminder that on Halloween, the line between reality and the supernatural can blur into something far more terrifying. Before we move on to the next story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? If so, please share your experience in the comments section. I read all your comments and try to reply to everyone. Additionally, I will feature some of your experiences in my next videos. I used to live near this really creepy old lady. I believe someone else lived there with her, but I never saw them around. I've actually never seen them. I was in the 5th grade around this time as well, and I always walked home from school. One day, I was walking home from a long day of school, and keep in mind, I walked past this lady's home. I took a quick glance at the woman's lawn. There had always been this old rusty fence around their yard. It couldn't really keep anything out, and I'm not sure why it was there, but it added to the eerie appearance. When I looked over, a man, probably 30 to 40 years old, was walking around the yard, fixing all the little knickknacks that had been spread across it recently. Things like those trashy fake flamingos and such. I can't really remember exactly what was there. When I saw him, he was cleaning off this creepy gargoyle they had on the porch. I always hated that thing. It had been there when I moved in and was still there to that day. I searched for gargoyles on random shopping websites and found the one they owned on Wayfair. I'm not even sure if it's still for sale there anymore. I was also 90% sure that thing was cursed. I don't know a lot about gargoyles, nor what exactly their purpose is, but I do know one thing: their gargoyle was evil. I remember some details of it. It had eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you went. The stone it was carved in was dark, almost black. It had small wings, disproportionate to its body. It also had little horns and small legs with large claws, but no arms. It basically looked like the type of crappy Halloween decoration you could buy at the mall or at Walmart. It was that time of year, after all. This memory brings me to the real story. After a few days, as we stepped closer to Halloween that year, I had forgotten about the man and the gargoyle. It was late one night. I hadn't been able to sleep, so I had taken some medicine to help. I was waiting for it to kick in while watching YouTube videos. Around midnight, I heard something that sounded like a rock hitting my window. At first, I gave no thought to it, not even trying to explain it away, just ignoring it. Then came another rock clinking against the window. This time I got up, then walked over to the window, peeking through the blinds. I swear to God, I can't explain this. That little gargoyle was now sitting on our lawn, looking directly into my eyes. I couldn't even gather the courage to scream. I always thought of myself as a brave person. Most stories and movies didn't scare me, hardly anything did. But at that moment, it felt way too real. The thing crawled towards the window in an instant, and I hadn't even moved yet. I was sure that I was having a horrible nightmare, a really, really vivid one. I took a few clumsy steps backward, not wanting to see the thing crawling towards me anymore. I knew it could break my window with its leg, or with a wing, or even its head like a kid throwing a rock. But as I fell back onto my bed, staring at the blinds, waiting for something to happen, it never did. I waited for hours, ready for something to crash through my window, but nothing happened. As I waited and waited in suspense, I eventually fell asleep staring at the blinds. I woke up in the morning and quickly ran over to the window and peeked through the blinds to see the gargoyle was in its original position in their yard. It was as if it never happened, but it felt so real. To this day, I walk past that statue on the way home, constantly wondering if it was a dream or if it really happened, constantly watching, waiting for that gargoyle to look back at me and confirm to me my worst fear. Before we move on to the next story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? If so, please share your experience in the comments section. I read all your comments and try to reply to everyone. Additionally, I will feature some of your experiences in my next videos. I've had a few paranormal experiences, some interesting, others quite frightening, but this one really stands out as the most disturbing thing to have ever happened to me. It was on Halloween night in 2004, and it was a really long and stressful year. I had ended a long-time abusive marriage that took a long, grueling 2 years to finalize. I was transitioning into the role of being a single parent as well as experiencing life again as a single woman. I had been invited to my good friend's Halloween party across town. I called one of my best girlfriends and asked if she wanted to go with me. I was excited when she agreed, and we set about the fun task of planning our costumes. I wanted to go as a hippie, and my friend Jane went as a pirate. I was excited at the prospect of doing something special that night, as my daughter was with her father, and it would be the first time that I didn't go trick-or-treating with her. Jane and I arrived at the Halloween party fashionably late. It was a fun party with the house decorated brilliantly and plenty of savory eats and drinks. As we made our way around the room, I noticed that everyone attending the party were couples except for Jane and myself. I began to feel very out of place because I was single. I'd never enjoyed dating and much preferred to have one special someone in my life. I left the party feeling depressed and a bit hopeless. Most of the single men I had met so far were not interested in someone who had a child. When I arrived home around midnight, I went straight to bed, hoping sleep would block out my bad feelings and that I would feel better in the morning. But that wasn't to be. That night, I woke up drenched in sweat from a nightmare where an evil man was out to get me. But when I woke up, I felt every millimeter of a man's hand on my right hip. I tried to move, but my arms had been pinned down, and the weight of someone else on me was too heavy. I could see the outline of a man above me, but not the details. It was similar to the way the predator was invisible in the original movie. I struggled to get the words out of my mouth for him to get off of me. After a couple of tries, I finally was able to yell out. He climbed off the bed and proceeded to walk over to the doorway and into the hallway. He leaned against the doorframe and lingered there for a moment. Terrified, I kept saying to him, "Please, please go away, please." I had never been so scared. He eventually walked further away, but this time stayed leaning on the stair railing. Then at some point, he simply faded away like a strange wind had collected him. The next morning, I called a woman who was a psychic. I filled her in on all the details of what happened the evening before. She told me that when we are feeling negative and depressed feelings, we leave ourselves open to events like the one I experienced, open and vulnerable to demons and spirits. After a banishing ceremony, she left on her way, and ever since, I haven't experienced another thing like it. But every time I go to bed anymore, I want to cry at the thought that I might wake up and that figure will be back. If you find these stories chilling, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more gripping tales. Share your story in the comments below. I love to hear your experiences. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.